the news, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. And as is customary, I want to take this opportunity to welcome our listeners who are joining us on Freedom Radio from Rob Street, Georgetown. And I want to welcome our viewers on Facebook who are joining us right across the length and breadth of Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, and even further afield. And as I would normally say, Guyana is a dynamic country, a dynamic society, and in any given week, there are many, many issues which require our discussion. Last week, we didn't have the program because I did an interview with Globespan, and that was aired on Facebook instead of this program. And I think that that was a very good program. The reviews that we got from that program was very, very good. The topic there was corruption in politics, in particular, a focus on corruption or allegations of corruption during the People's Progressive Party tenure in government, as well as corruption under this government. So it was a hot topic, and a number of issues were discussed. If you get an opportunity, I would encourage you to look at the video. Once again, it's on Facebook, on Globespan, and it is also on my Facebook page. Well, there are a number of issues that I would like to touch on tonight, and I want to begin by informing you that today I was part of a delegation led by the leader of the opposition and presidential candidate of the PPP, Irfan Ali. We met with the chairman of GCOM, and we discussed a number of very important issues that we consider very crucial to the integrity of the electoral process, and we thought that we would hold frank communication with the chairman so that we are on the same level. Normally when you write or you speak through the medium of press conferences, things are becoming distorted. So we thought that a one-on-one rapport with the chairman or the chairwoman was important. We raised the important issues of one, the merger of the list, that the law does not provide for the merger of the house-to-house data, that the law does not provide for a second OLE, that the law only contemplates one OLE, that the data collected by during the house-to-house process has not been the subject of a claim and objection session or period, and therefore it's unverified data and it's dangerous to use. Quite apart from that, we have also examined the data for ourselves, and it has various levels of errors at various levels, in various categories. Names wrong, addresses wrong, persons can be found at the location where they are said to be located, etc. So those were the kind of issues that we discussed, and we also dealt with the overseas monitoring of the entire electoral process, beginning from inside of GCOM, as well as international monitoring or monitoring by international agencies, going up to elections day, even after elections day, until the results are disclosed publicly. We insist that there are many international observer teams that have indicated to us that they are willing to be part of the international observer delegation for these elections. We know that UNDP has offered assistance from now to work internally within the GCOM Secretariat and to also oversight the IT process. You know, that's a very important component of the electoral machinery and the electoral process, and it is very important. We don't want to interfere with the Secretariat doing their job, but we believe that if it is subject to scrutiny by international experts who can verify the authenticity and the integrity of the process, obviously that will enhance the integrity of the electoral process itself. So we emphasize that that's a must, and that GCOM must accept all invitations that they are getting to scrutinize, monitor, and oversight the electoral process at every level. Of course, we are aware that the Commonwealth Secretariat, CARICOM, UNISOR, the UN, the Carter Center, and many other, the OAS, and many other organizations have expressed an intention to be here. But of course, the modalities of how they will come here will have to be worked out. So we ask that that process begins, because they have to receive a letter of invitation, then they have to be accredited, and the whole process has to be kick-started. So to get them here and get them ready to begin the job of observing the elections. We also raised the issue of polling day staff and training of presiding officers, the way that they must function on elections day, and a whole host of other issues, including voter education, how important that is, how important it is to recognize, for example, when a ballot is spoiled. We believe that on the last occasion there were a number of spoiled ballots that were, there were a number of ballots that were deemed to be spoiled ballots, where in fact they were not spoiled ballots. You would recall that the difference in the official results between the two parties was just over 4,000 votes, and the number of spoiled ballots was also just over 4,000. You also will recall that in Region 8, we lost a MP seat. We lost this region, the national seat, by just one vote. Just one vote. We won the regional seat, so we won the regional elections, but we did not win the national elections for that region. We didn't win the parliamentary seat for that region, simply because we won the regional, the local election, but we didn't win the parliamentary seat, simply because of one vote difference. And there were 15 spoiled ballots in that one region. 15 spoiled ballots. I have no doubt if those ballots were examined, we could have won that seat, because you have presiding officers, because they make the call on polling day. When the count begins, it is the presiding officer who makes the final determination as to whether a vote is valid or not. And once the law is, these things are governed by law, and once the law says that once you can clearly identify the mark and which party that mark was closest approximate to, which party symbol, that vote must go to that party. So let us say it's the cup and there is a mark, but it's not in the box where it should be. If it is closest to the cup than to any other party symbol, then that vote should go to the PPP. That is not, those little things are not clear to presiding officers, or they deliberately make perverse decisions because of their prejudices and biases. And these are the things that we must guard against. I believe we have lost thousands of votes, the PPP, because of wrong calling or wrong deeming of votes as invalid votes, whereas in fact and in law they were not invalid votes. When we asked for that recount to be done for that region, GCOM refused. GCOM refused to grant that request. We requested a recount for that region and for several regions, several other regions, and none of the requests were granted, although the law does not allow for GCOM to refuse to grant those requests when they are made, once they are made within certain time frame. And all our requests were made within the prescribed time frame, but none were granted. And those are grounds that are stated in our elections petition. And if ever we were able to get that petition heard and we were able to get a recount done, I am sure based on that ground alone, we would have at least won that region, and we possibly could have changed the electoral results based only on that ground, on the question of a recount, because GCOM clearly acted unlawfully when they refused to grant the request for recounts in the regions that we requested recounts. And I'm sure that a court would have ordered the recount to be done, and once that court ordered that recount and those ballots are put before a judge and we are able to argue based upon the markings on the ballots, we would have been able to, I think, on that ground alone, make a material impact on the electoral results. But the elections petition never saw the light of day, and that is where it is now. So I think that the meeting that we had was very fruitful. We had a full discussion of a number of crucial and fundamental issues relative to the electoral process and relative to the integrity of the electoral process. I trust that the leader of the opposition will speak more expansively on this issue when he speaks at his next press conference. But I was happy that I was there at that meeting and I was able to make a contribution. I think it was a good meeting and we were able to accomplish a great deal. But as I said, you will hear more from the leader of the opposition when he speaks at his press conference. You would have read in the newspapers that we have challenged the ruling of the Rice Assessment Committee chairman in Region 5. This is a young man, his name is Omadat Chandan, who is extraordinarily arrogant and, if I may dare say, not versed in the law, and I'm trying to help him and to guide him along the way, and the boy is so, I don't know if it is ego, if it's arrogance, but it was a horrible display of a lack of professionalism on his part and clear bias, and he's performing a quasi-judicial function in that capacity. Imagine he's a representative, he's appointed to perform what is called a quasi-judicial function because he's asked to hear and determine legal proceedings filed against rice farmers, which if the proceedings are based upon the outcome of the proceedings, these farmers can lose their lands and they can lose millions of dollars of money. Therefore, he is bound to behave like a judge, he's bound to function like a judge, and he's bound to obey the law. This guy does not understand the basic principles, the rudimentary principles of law, including how he should behave. He shows open hostility to the rice farmers, open bias towards the MMA, and in his pronouncements, in his actions. He refuses to allow the farmers to get a lawyer. He refuses to grant an adjournment to them, though the matter is being called for the first time. And that alone establishes the bias that I'm speaking about. But most fundamentally, this guy is appointed by the Minister of Agriculture, and he works in the Ministry of Agriculture, and he's appointed by the Minister of Agriculture, his boss, to hear and determine cases in which the MMA, a department within the Ministry of Agriculture, has instituted legal proceedings. How can he be fair? How can he appear to be fair? Remember, the law is not only the actuality of bias, but there is a perception. And once you are perceived to be biased, the law says that you must disqualify yourself. You must recuse yourself. And that he was not appointed by the process outlined by the law. The process outlined by the law in the Rice Farmer Security of Tenure Act, because he is not a magistrate, he has to be appointed by a special process. And he was not appointed by that special process. And more importantly, MMA cannot be a landlord under the Rice Farmer Security of Tenure Act. The act is very clear. The state or state agencies cannot be landlord under the act. They can't bring proceedings as landlord under the Rice Farmer Security of Tenure Act. So the thing is wrong on so many levels, and I explained to the gentleman, I wrote it out for him in several pages of legal submissions. The man dismissed all the submissions and basically tell me I can go and do what I want to do. This guy is a law unto himself. So I took the matter to the High Court, and we will see. You will see within a matter of days the case will be determined in the High Court, and you will hear about it, because the proceedings are wrong, they are legally deficient, his appointment is bad in law, the way he behaved is prejudicial and constitute bias. So there are so many grounds upon which that decision and those proceedings can be impugned that any judge, reasonable, rational judge, will grant all the orders that we are seeking. So the struggles of the rice farmers continue. They now have to go to the High Court to get justice, because the tribunal established is not listening to them and is not complying with the law and was badly appointed anyhow. So the rice farmers, through the Guyana Rice Producers Association, we have approached the High Court, and we have filed proceedings to quash the appointment of the chairman, to quash all the proceedings that have been filed, and to quash any decisions he makes in relation to any of the cases. So there is no way that those proceedings are going to survive. I don't think we need to go beyond the High Court in any event, but if needs be, we shall go to the Court of Appeal and to the CCJ if it requires that, because these rice farmers must get a fair hearing by a competent court or by a competent tribunal as prescribed by the law. And that is what they are entitled to, and that is what they will get. And I don't care what happens, that is what will happen. The government has failed to say anything about compensation of the people in Region 5. Nothing has been said yet. I have said on this program, and I see people have been critical of me, but they don't understand what I'm saying. I am not blaming the government for the high tides. I am saying to you that the regional chairman complained to the government that the sea breaches were there, and he called upon them to have them remedied, to repair the sea breaches. And his calls fell on deaf ears. Had the sea breaches been there, the damages would not, had the sea breaches been repaired, the damages done would not have been as severe as they were and as they are. So I am not blaming the government for the high tide. I am blaming the government for not acting upon the calls of the chairman. The chairman of the region called upon Minister Patterson since February of this year, pointing to him that these sea walls have been breached and that once there is a high tide, the consequences are going to be catastrophic. And when the chairman said so, the REO of the region said that the chairman is lying. The REO is employed by the government. Said that the chairman is lying and the chairman is um, indulging in scare tactics. Well, they ignored the chairman and they did so at their own peril. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of acres of land, fertile land, land under cultivation, have been destroyed. Millions of dollars of losses, millions of dollars in animals, value in animals are now dead because of this. And all of it because, because of the negligence of the government. And still, they are not yet discussing any form of compensation with the people of Region 5. In Region 6, you would have read in the newspapers, it is even getting worse. The regional chairman has disclosed that there are not money in the region to assist any of the farmers. So, and the money that they have can't drain, can't provide water for the rice farmers and for the cash crop farmers in the region. So Region 6, the farming community and the farmers are heading for another disaster. The regional chairman said that he only has about $10 million in his budget left, and that will only last for about a week or 2 weeks of providing water. And when the water cannot be provided, then all the rice will spoil and all the people's cash crop will go down the drain. So that is how they are running this country. That is how they are running this country. And there is money in the budget and there is money in the contingency fund that they can use. They are using it to travel all over the world. Basil Williams is in Washington. Nagamutu is in Canada and is in the United States. How is it that they are getting money to do that? Some one of them went to Ireland for medical treatment. They are getting money to do that. Why is it that they can't get money to pump water for the farmers? The farmers are employing thousands of people. They are feeding this country. They are feeding themselves. They're not depending upon a hopeless, hapless, incompetent government for jobs because the government can't create jobs, cannot create jobs. They're not depending upon them. They're finding jobs for themselves. They are feeding their families. Plus, they are feeding the country and they are contributing to the national domestic product of this country, the GDP of this country. Yet, they can't get basic assistance from the government to which they are entitled. And as if it is not, what is going on is not terrible, you would have read that Troy Resources, the largest gold mining company in the country, which was one of the only mining operations making profits, has announced that it is not making profit anymore and it is retrenching workers. So far, it has dismissed 300 workers. So you have 300 more people on the breadline. That is to add to the 30,000 that have lost their jobs since this government took office. 30,000, add 300 more to that. Not a single job they have created other than for their cronies, their friends, and their families. Not a single job. The university graduation was 2 days ago. Another 1,000 or more graduates have come out of the university. Not a single new job on the horizon for them. 300 jobs have been lost at Troy Resources. None of the productive sectors are performing. None. Sugar, they have killed it. Rice, they are killing it every day. Agriculture, they are killing it in every respect. Timber, it's dead. Gold and diamond, well, you see what's happening. A huge multinational company like Troy Resources is closing doors. Rusal is closing up, as you are reading in the newspapers. Forestry is dead, as I said. Commerce, the commercial sector, the private sector, and the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce are crying every day that business is bad. Business has declined by 45%. 45% since the no confidence motion was passed. Crime is spiraling out of control, and there is not a single thing that the government is willing to do or shows any propensity that it has any willingness to do anything about the crime situation in the country. Ramjatan continues to struggle to be the next prime minister, and they're kicking him around like a foot cloth, like a floor cloth. That's what is important to them. That is the big thing that's going on. How much seats this one must get and how much seats that one must get if they win the elections. That is what they are engaging in, while the country is perishing and the people are punishing. And they are avoiding Ramjatan like a plague. They don't want him. You hear what they're saying? That they must follow the constitution. That is absolute nonsense. They want to follow constitution. The whole world knows, every child in this country knows that they have pissed and trampled upon the constitution of Guyana. Suddenly they want to follow the constitution? Who these people think they are talking to? And what they want to follow the constitution about? In relation to what? They are saying that the constitution says that the president must choose the prime minister. Of course the constitution says that. But the president can agree to choose Ramjatan. That is not in violation of the constitution. That is in conformity with the constitution. You can make a political arrangement and then you exercise your constitutional power and you choose Ramjatan. You are the president. If he does that, he's exercising his constitutional freedom and he's choosing Ramjatan over any other candidate. What is wrong with that? Why he can't do that? Isn't that what he did with Nagamutu? Wasn't the what you call it, accord, the Hormanston, not the Hormanston, some accord they call it, a Commingsburg Accord? Wasn't the Commingsburg Accord obeyed in that same way? The president exercising his powers of choosing his prime minister, he chose Nagamutu. It is the same thing that can happen now, but the truth of the matter is that they don't want Ramjatan, so they're kicking Ramjatan like a football. They're kicking him like a door rag. Well, I don't have no sympathy for him. He deserves that. When you live like that, and you don't have spine, and you don't have backbone, and you don't stand for principles, but you are like a jellyfish, and you want power at all costs, that is what you end up with. That is what you end up with. And that is where Ramjatan is now, where they're just kicking him around. So he's getting exactly what he deserves. And I have no sympathy for that, for him for that. And I want to talk a little about the Sarah case that was dismissed against GBTI. Now, you have to be of a special mental pedigree if you are in government and you are going to an election within 3 or 4 months, and you directing a state agency to go against the headquarters of your largest commercial bank. 3 months before the election, you want to seize the property of the largest commercial local bank in your country. You have to be mad. You have to be a mad set of people in government. So, and that is what you're seeing. I can't imagine where else on planet Earth a government who is going to elections 3 months before you are going to try to seize the headquarters of your largest indigenous bank. You have to be smoking something. And that is what this government attempted to do. Using Sarah, they want to seize the headquarters of a bank. The bank bought that empty land at a public bidding process 12 years ago. 12 years ago for $2 million US. That was cow pasture. It was abandoned land. And at a public bidding process, the bank submitted the highest bid. and acquire that land for $2 million, then went and spent another 20 to I don't know how many million US dollars in building a headquarters. And Clive Thomas and Retty Meyer want to go and seize the people headquarters. These guys should be thrown in jail. These people cannot be sane people. They cannot be sane. Something is fundamentally wrong with them mentally. And then, of course, I predicted, and we in the PVP predicted, that not a single action under this legislation will succeed. We predicted that. We held meetings right across the length and breadth of this country. I wrote no less than 10 articles on this particular issue, that the act is unconstitutional. First of all, the act was brought into force to exact political revenge from the PPP and perceived supporters of the PPP. That's the first wrong. It was not a law that had any purpose about nation building or anything good about it. It was simply brought in here to use as a weapon against PPP leaders and persons who were perceived to have benefited under the PPP government. When you use a law for such an ulterior and ill motive, then you are destined to fail, because the institution of the law was never intended to be used for those immoral and illicit purposes. The law was invented, and laws are passed for peace, order, and good government. They are passed for the benefit of society. They are passed for the protection of the rights and freedoms of the inhabitants of a society. They are not passed to be used as a weapon against the people of that society. And whenever you want to use the law like that, you will fail. And that is what I have been saying from the beginning. And that is why I have challenged the constitutionality of this law. And the proceedings are pending. I have also challenged the appointment of Retty Meyer as deputy director and Clive Thomas as the director of this entity called SARA. That they were appointed illegally. The Act says that they must be appointed by the National Assembly. They were appointed by the office of the President, and they blackguardedly and shamelessly continue to hold office in clear violation of the law. These people have no shame. And that is why when the government changes, they will have to answer. Those who are openly taking taxpayers' money in such a blackguarded and vulgar way must account. They are being paid millions and millions of dollars a month, though their appointment is patently and manifestly illegal. How can a government, a new government, turn a blind eye to such atrocious and tragic violations of the law? Those things will have to be legally rectified at some point in time. I filed proceedings challenging the appointment of these two, but the judge has not ruled as yet. Fortunately, in the GBTI case, a judge has ruled. And the very ground upon which I challenged the two appointments are the very grounds that the judge upheld. The very ground. And you know SARA has filed proceedings against a whole host of people. They have filed proceedings against Jack Dale, against Lon Chung, against, I don't know, about 20 different people. Clement Rohi, Sheikh Bax, Jennifer Westford, Priya Manik Chand, I don't know who and who else. But they have filed a number of legal proceedings, and all will fail. All will fail. Because the law is used, the law was brought into force by an illicit motive or for an illicit motive. The content of the law is violative of the Constitution, and the occupants of holders of offices created by that law were appointed illegally and continue to hold offices illegally under that law. So from every conceivable respect, the litigation filed are going to fail. And when they file again, they will fail again. So I wanted to speak on the Sarah case as well. The other point that I want to talk about is the sales of lands at Wales. Recall, when they closed Wales, there was a promise made that lands will be sold at cheap prices or given to the workers. That promise was made by this government. Not a single square inch of land has been allocated to or granted to a single sugar worker. Not a single block of land, not a single square inch of land has been given to a single sugar worker as yet. But foreigners are coming into the country and are getting thousands of acres of these lands by a process that no one knows, at a price that no one knows. How these foreigners are selected, no one knows. There is no open, transparent system by which these lands are allocated or these lands are sold. But foreigners are coming in and they are taking these lands by the thousands of acres. I know that there is a gentleman on the west bank of the Marara who has submitted a proposal 2 years or more ago to the Minister of Agriculture asking for 1,000 acres of this land, that he will buy it. He will buy it from the government, and he guarantees them that he will employ a minimum of 50 to 100 former sugar workers. The man never even got a reply to his letter. Not a reply to his letter. I read the proposal that he submitted. Detailed proposal. He submitted a project plan, a feasibility study of his project, financial projections, how much money he will make, how much jobs he will create, how the community was going to benefit, an impact assessment of his activities in the area, all of that. Detailed document. The man spent a lot of money in enlisting the services of experts and professionals in preparing his package of documents. Sent it to the Minister of Agriculture. Never got a response. Never got a response up to today. But some man from Grenada can walk into this country and take 1,000 acres of our lands, while the people, the Guyanese around the estates, continue to starve and continue to struggle for a daily bread. And the lands that are there, that were promised to them, that their mother and father and their grandfather toiled and died for, those lands are not, they're not getting a square inch of it, but it is being handed to foreigners by an illegal government, by a government that is illegal. All these transactions, I'm telling you, will have to be reviewed by a new government, because there is no cabinet. There is no cabinet, and the government is illegal. And these decisions can't be made. They are no longer caretaker government, you know. Even as a caretaker government, they couldn't make these decisions. But their caretaker status expired on September the 18th. Because it was from June the 18th, when the CCJ ruled, their caretaker status began. On September the 18th, that 3 months period expired, so they became illegal as of September the 18th. And they continue to make decisions that are important, that are way beyond their legal limits to make. So these are all decisions that will have to be reviewed when we get into government. I also wanted to mention, but I am running out of time already. Time flies when I'm on this program. I wanted to speak a little about Walter Rodney. A lot of letters are being written in the newspapers about Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry because, as you know, Mrs. Rodney, Dr. Patricia Rodney, in a speech delivered in London, asked for the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry report to be made public. And this government doesn't want to make it public. But every citizen should go to the National Assembly, go to the Parliament office, and you can get a copy of the report. It was laid in the Parliament, and therefore it is a public document. The government will never want to circulate this document. They will never want to do that. But every Guyanese who wants to read this report should go to the clerk of the National Assembly and request a copy of it. And you can get it, I suppose, at a price they will charge you to photocopy it. But it should be the mandatory reading of every single Guyanese who wants to understand the evolution of politics in this country from independence to the mid-80s. This report documents it, captures the atmosphere that existed at the time, captured the political climate, captured the political system created by the PNC, captured what transpired to opposition politicians at the hands of Burnham. All of that is documented in this report. I see UC Kwayana faulting the PPP government for the terms of reference. Let me read the terms of reference. First of all, let me say this. Walter Rodney was one of the greatest Guyanese ever lived, and perhaps will go down as one of the greatest Guyanese ever. He was a brilliant scholar, a brilliant historian. He went to Queen's College, won a Guyana scholarship, went to Jamaica, University College, Jamaica, Mona. That was a branch of the University of the West Indies. Then from there he went on to Oriental College, a branch of the University of London, in London, where he did a PhD. He was 24 years old, just 24 years old, when he got his PhD thesis. Just 24 years old. Brilliant man. Perhaps one of the first black West Indian to have gotten a PhD at that time. Definitely among the youngest ever. Since then to now, very few have been able to accomplish the PhD thesis and acquired a PhD at age 24. Walter Rodney did that. Then he went to Jamaica. He taught in Jamaica. He joined the Rastafarian movement, was engaged in a lot of struggles in Jamaica. Then he went to Africa, where he lectured at many universities, Tanzania, Papua New Guinea, and a whole host of universities. Up to now, African professors speak about Rodney with the greatest of veneration. His legacy is very rich in Africa. They respect him in Africa. They read him thoroughly in Africa. And when he came to his homeland, his own Guyanese, they murdered him. His own government murdered him. And that is what the Commission of Inquiry report discloses. The evidence is there, the testimony of so many people, including UC Kwayana, including a whole host of WPA leaders. They themselves spoke about what Burnham did to Rodney, about what Burnham did to them, what the PNC did to them. And today, they are lying in bed with the PNC. Today, David Hines can write boldly that the PNC is the lesser of two evils. This is a party that murdered his leader. There's no doubt about that. Kwayana is annoyed with Patricia Rodney, the wife of Walter Rodney, because she opposed Burnham getting an award from South Africa. She said he's writing now that she should have never stopped or prevented Burnham from getting an award. Imagine Forbes Burnham getting an award based upon freedom and democracy. This guy was the greatest demagogue in this region. He killed so many of his political opponents, or so many of them died under his government. Walter Rodney being one of them, blown to pieces by a bomb. And Burnham laughed. And you have to read this report. I remember the march from Buxton to Georgetown, sometime in the 1980s. I think it was Rodney's funeral, I'm not sure. I was very, very young. And there was a chant. And this march was led by Rupnarayan, Kwayana, and I, Moses Bhagwan, all of them, Clive Thomas, same Clive Thomas. The chant was, who killed Rodney? Burnham killed Rodney. Who killed Rodney? Burnham killed Rodney. Today, these very people are in bed with Forbes Burnham Party, the PNC. The players are still there. The philosophy of the party is still there. The track record of the party is still there. And Kwayana has the audacity to write in the newspapers that the PPP wanted to get political mileage out of the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry. That Commission of Inquiry was long overdue. Rodney died in 1980. That Commission of Inquiry was established by President Ramatar 34 years after. 34 years after. And he said that they were not consulted. The WPA was not consulted. That is true, because President Ramatar came from America, came from a trip in the United States. I remember distinctly. And he called myself and Dr. Luncheon to a meeting. And he said that he met with Dr. Patricia Rodney, the wife of Walter Rodney. And he has promised the family that he will set up a commission of inquiry. And that we must begin to work. And I drafted the terms of reference along with Dr. Luncheon. I drafted it. And we spoke to Dr. Patricia Rodney and Asha Rodney, Walter Rodney's daughter, at length. I used to speak to them almost daily. And they said to us that we must not consult the WPA. They said, of course, we must not consult the PNC because they are of the view that the PNC murdered Walter Rodney. So we must not consult them. But they said specifically that we must not consult the WPA, that the family does not trust the WPA and what the WPA has done for Rodney. The family told us that we can't betray the family wishes. We had to respect those wishes. And that is why there was no consultation. There was no consultation with the PPP too. We didn't consult with the PPP. The terms of reference were discussed with the family. The draft of it was done, sent to the family, and it was approved. And we felt that that's all that we needed to do. Because it was the family's request. They asked for closure. They asked for closure. And how did we arrive at the names of the commissioners? Rodney spent time in Jamaica, so we chose a Jamaican. At that time, eminently qualified lady, she was the chairman of the Council of Legal Education. Her name is, I'll get her name in a minute. Jacqueline Samuels Brown, QC. She was at that time the chairperson of the Council of Legal Education. So we chose a person from Jamaica because Rodney spent a lot of time in Jamaica. We tried to get someone in Africa. We tried to get a retired Chief Justice of Kenya. I spoke to the gentleman myself, but he couldn't get, at the time, he couldn't get leave to come because he was prepared to come. That was the kind of respect that the people of Africa have for Walter Rodney. Right away, the man was prepared to take sabbatical leave from the bench and come here. But we had to await a period of time for him to complete certain cases that he was doing at the time, and we couldn't wait. Then we chose Richard Cheltenham from Barbados, because Barbados was the country to which his family ran, because they felt that they would have been killed in this country had they remained after Rodney was blown up to pieces. So they went and they lived in Barbados for a number of years. So the Rodney family had a connection in Barbados. We chose someone from Barbados. And see that, he was the chairman, Sir Richard Cheltenham. And then the third person was Seenat Jairam. Walter Rodney believed in multiracial politics. Rodney fought for racial unity in this country and class unity. And we wanted an Indo-Guyanese, but at the same time we didn't want that person to be in Guyana so that to have any prejudices. We wanted someone who, though Guyanese, though Indo-Guyanese, must have been outside for a while. And Seenat Jairam, senior counsel, former judge of Trinidad and Tobago and former president of the Law Society of Trinidad and Tobago, he fitted the bill. And that is how we arrived at the name Seenat Jairam. So that is how these people were appointed. That's how they were chosen. And as soon as the PNC took office, the PNC took office while this commission was still going on. And they truncated the commission. They stifled it for resources when the commission was concluding its work. And some of the most important bits of testimony were going to come from people like Norman MacLean, from the army. And perhaps the president started to feel, jittery because it was coming close to home. People like Jerry Gavaya would have had to testify, or maybe he did. I don't think he completed his testimony. The commission was going to subpoena people like Robert Corbin. They would have had to go into the witness box and talk about Rodney and talk about that period. That is why the government truncated and aborted the commission. And today, Guyana wants to be critical of the PPP. The PPP played a very historical role in doing a commission of inquiry for Rodney, which this country owes Rodney, and this country owes the people of the world that commission of inquiry, because the people of the world needed to know what happened to Walter Rodney. I remember sometime they were breaking, this commission was being streamed live right across the world. And whenever there was a break in transmission through to the internet or whatever it is that caused it, hundreds of emails used to come from Atlanta, from the United States, from the Caribbean, and most importantly, from Europe and from Africa. So many people were tuned on to this commission and they were looking at it live every day. And yes, the government of Guyana retained someone to write a book based upon this commission because it needs to be recorded. We will not allow Rodney to be killed and to be swept aside. For 34 years we did that until President Ramatar did something about it. And President Jagdeo was also going to do something about it in 2005. This commission was supposed to have been done. Let me tell you an important piece of information. In 2005, the then government headed by President Jagdeo was talking to the family, and a decision was made since then to do the inquiry. And the family had appointed Rupert Rupnarayan, Dr. Rupert Rupnarayan. That is what they told us in 2014 when we were doing this commission. They said that they put Dr. Rupnarayan in charge of liaising with the government. And you know what Rupnarayan told them? That the government changed its mind. And you know what Rupnarayan told the government? Rodney family changed their mind. They are no longer interested in the commission of inquiry. So the Rodney family had good reason. They had good reason to ask us not to make the WPA part of the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry. And I hope people like Keith Branch, he's an avid viewer of this program. I hope he's listening to me and he's hearing, he's a WPA member. And he always puts critical comment on the page. And I don't bother with him. Maybe he doesn't know I know all these things about, he defends the PNC. But they betrayed Rodney. I didn't do that. They have to live with their own conscience. And they have to tell their children and their future generation how it is that they could flip-flop on such a crucial question. And that is why perhaps Rodney didn't trust any one of them. And that is why only his brother was with him tonight. There is a reason why Rodney didn't go with any one of them tonight when he was blew up. Only his brother was there. Perhaps he didn't trust them either. But I'll be writing about it this weekend. So you will look forward for my article this weekend. This is where I have to say good evening. I have come quickly to the end of my program time. The operator is signaling to me. So I want to thank you once again for joining me in this program and thanking you for the hour that you spent with me. Until we meet again, please take care and join me again next week when we resume this important interaction. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your week.